Greetings and welcome back. This is still the third decade of the 21st century. It is the 24th of November, 2024. If you're new to my channel for any reason, if you're not familiar with my content, I always open up with announcing the date and trying to highlight the fact that it is indeed the third decade of the 21st century as a means to sort of like, hey, it's the third decade of the 21st century. And instead of talking about colonizing Mars, instead of talking about taking vacations to the moon, things that people had once hypothesized we'd be doing in the 21st century. No, instead we're talking about institutional racism and all kinds of nonsensical stuff. The amount of groin injuries in girl sports. I mean, you do you. I'm a big fan of, the freedom to be who you are within the legal premises that's provided for us. The laws and the rules and whatnot that we've tried to agree upon to govern us. Not everybody agrees, but to the same point, for the most part, you're free to be who you are. Some people may have a difference in opinion on that, but, whatever. I view certain things in many ways a lot like religion. If you've ever noticed, some religions have a lack of tolerance. They have a lack of willingness to sort of openly accept things that sort of challenge their way of thinking or challenge their existence and their being. So they take a very, very hard stance. If it's not in their rule book, then, they don't have a tolerance for it. And I feel like so many other subjects can learn from that particular lesson. You're demanding tolerance, you're demanding acceptance, you're literally demanding certain things while at the same time you have none of your own. With that being said, I'm probably going to say that phrase a lot. I apologize in advance. This video has been a long time coming. It's probably on the verge of being 3 months in the making. If you leave a comment on my channel, I do my very best to read, react, and respond to those comments. One of you leaves a awful lot of long comments that I'm assuming are maybe done on the phone or maybe not necessarily grammar checked or spell checked. So my apologies if I stumble through them as I try to make sense of them. For whatever reason, unless I'm just not that smart, which is entirely possible, I have to copy them from YouTube into a Word doc and then try to clean them up as best as I can so that they go in order that I receive them. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. All right. So the first one, Stacer Bell. I survived the purge, I think. Well, I haven't necessarily purged anybody per se. If we think and feel differently, I'm not going to purge anybody. But at the same time, I think I've been purged from other people, which is fine. And I believe that comment was made directly my niece through my wife. I believe she made the comment that based on certain things that she was, friend or family, she was going to purge people. And I was like, okay, whatever. I don't agree with the sentiment, but you do you. So I'm not a big fan of purging, but at the same time, I do understand the sentiment where if people have like extremely opposing views from you, I can certainly understand the desire to, I don't need to expose myself to this anymore. Give me 1 second. All right, where were we? Again, Stacer Bell, yelling at the screen, you were going to explain more about the hereditary disease you discovered through 23andMe. My response was, oh my God, you're right. I knew I forgot something. Of course I'm right. And then Andrew replied, laugh out loud, that confidence. So what I learned was that if I didn't talk about it before, during my trip to Chicago with my wife, I got a chance to physically meet in person my first cousin on my biological father's side, and then I got to meet my aunt, my biological father's sister, and her husband. And it was surreal. It was a trip. The fact that we grew up so close to each other and never knew each other existed. The fact that he married a girl I graduated high school from. I even got to meet her, and we both just sat there like, I don't recognize you. And she's like, I don't recognize you. And I'm like, God. And we felt kind of weird about it. Um, what I learned was that it is definitely on my biological father's side, that as far back as they can trace it, it's definitely something that potentially started with them. Now, they don't know why or how. They don't know if it's, due to pure blood inbreeding, which was not an uncommon practice some 300 years ago. And it wasn't. I mean, the things that we look at now is in like, ooh, what the hell's wrong with that? Some 300 years ago, people used to look at certain things a lot differently than they look at them now. So we don't really know the origins of how it happened, but I know a lot of genetic mutations originate from inbreeding, just because of what they didn't understand back then. Or, perhaps record keeping wasn't what it was, and people didn't realize how closely related they were. I don't know. Not exactly a rabbit hole I want to go down, but I learned some of the extent to which the gastrointestinal issue I was born with, how hereditary it was on that side of the family. Now, enter Andra Book. Again, I'm going to do my best to get through your stuff, but you have left a ton of it for me to get through. Your first uh, response was, oh, the LGBTQ stuff reminds me, I was going to say on the previous video that I support anyone's lifestyle decisions as long as no one tries to tell me they need to hurt others or themselves to be happy. Like, we need to draw the line somewhere. I don't know where everyone is on that, but to me, it's okay as long as it's not hurting anyone. So, furry costumes, whatever, pursue your bliss, some form of physical damage, hell no. If your preference would look like abuse in the mainstream, it's not going to fly. Again, these issues are typically very fringe, but there seems to be a push to make them mainstream in the past few years. I'm going to pause on that one because you're not wrong. Trying to normalize pedophilia through the new renaming of minor attracted persons, I disagree with that. Trying to allow children of a minor age to transition even before they're in double digits, because I don't know what it is, but some kids are hitting puberty a lot earlier than maybe some of us did. And in the interest of not being considered offensive or not being considered bad or whatever the hell it is, some parents are entertaining some really, really, really extreme stuff that cannot be reversed for males or females. I'm with you on that one. If you want to transition as an adult, if you've lived your life, your parents have done their best to get you through high school to the age of adulthood, and you are now what we legally consider an adult, and you want to do whatever it is you want to do, by all means. Beyond that, I think there's a certain responsibility to preserve the innocence of youth and to let kids be kids. Just because a kid says they want to be a fire truck doesn't mean we got to have surgery to turn them into a fire truck like a transformer. Not everybody has to agree with that, but it is what it is. I think for the most part, we all have a pretty good idea of what is and is not acceptable. If people are trying to pass off abuse of others or self, physical harm, mutilations, etc., and whatever else typically falls into this category as a lifestyle choice, I'm going to go with fuck no on that one. The most I will say is that there are instances when it is a mental health issue, not necessarily a jail issue, and we need to differentiate. But that's it. We just need to draw the line somewhere. So some of the SM stuff and some of the trans stuff may fall into this category. The most recent Pinhead movie with the female Pinhead is a good example of this interaction. So there are just areas where these issues seem to interact, and it becomes clear that some people just want to self harm or harm others and want that to be acceptable in the mainstream. It's not going to be. There might be people who are in denial about that, but their denial does not have to automatically equal society wide acceptance. That is a very, very smart thing to say. We, as an entire society, as a mass, do not have to agree with the ideals of a few. If we are a society of 1 million, but less than 10,000 think this is normal, less than 10,000 think this is acceptable, less than 10,000 want to do this, as long as it's within the legal parameters of what the 990,000 think is okay, as far as Look, you're not trying to do this to others, you're just doing this to yourself. It's not illegal, by all means. I think the precipice, I think the danger is when we interact and interfere with children, to up to and including removing children from their parents, or school boards purposely and willingly hiding information from the parents. Remember, up until adulthood, the parents are ultimately in charge. That is their purview. You don't have to like it, it just is what it is. And I disagree with all that rhetoric and nonsense. Where are we? We cannot afford to really expect everyone's preference at the mainstream level. Again, there are people who would prefer to be cannibals too. Can't accept that. Sorry, not really. I'd be vaguely curious where people stand on this, because I think most people feel the same. I think they do too, and I think a lot of it, especially in today's modern age with social media and the number of celebrities that are on social media, and because celebrities don't want to lose their stock value, their ability to remain relevant, which ultimately is a source of their revenue. I think they go along with some really, really strange crap in a sense of trying to remain relevant. And I think you can broaden this to numerous topics. In the third decade of the 21st century, I don't think racism is anywhere it used to be in the 50s and 60s prior. I think, if anything, we have a new form of racism, and it's targeted directly at Caucasian heterosexual males. I feel like that's the new discrimination. We don't have to agree. You're free to feel however you want, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is like this modern societal trend is towards heterosexual Caucasian males as like being the enemy of just everything. And if you're not an ally, then you're automatically Hitler's long lost great grandson. I'm helping you make content, admit it, without my not at a loss for words post. 'Tis a little dead in the comments. Yeah, you're not wrong, but again, you're so far you're doing really good. I'm really digging what you're saying. But I don't know if you feel the same way. It'd be nice to get other interactions, especially people that may not entirely agree, but who are willing to have these conversations, like Stace. Stace doesn't agree on probably half of what we're talking about, if not close to 90% of what we're talking about. But Stace agrees we have to have these conversations. We have to identify each other. We have to talk to each other. We have to find a way to coexist. All right. What is EC? Sorry, not sure what that is. I responded, exceptional needs children, children with disabilities to any varying degree. Your response was, "Oh, okay, cool. I haven't checked back here in a while, but thanks for replying. We'll check back for new content in a bit. Just had extra work stuff the past few weeks. Hope your new job is going well." Sorry about that. The new job has kept me busy, which is why it's taken so long to get this video out. If you can tell by the surroundings, I'm currently not at home learning how to do the job. Okay, in a different topic, Chris Kyle always sounded like a liberal to me with that line about violence sometimes solves problems. Was he? I'm not saying he's wrong, but his assumption seems to be that moms tell people do not commit violence all the time, and that sounds like liberal mom type. LOL. Um, I think the vast majority of moms tend to be on the lesser violent side because of some of the possible outcomes of violence, like when does somebody know when to stop? When does somebody know when enough is enough? Um, Most of us in the military, because of the rules we had to follow, the orders we had to take, we tend to be a bit more socially liberal, but like governmentally conservative, because the two are not mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand. We want less government. We want less government involvement. We want more freedom. We want more autonomy. That would make us more traditionally liberal, not liberal extremism. Part of that autonomy is the right to bear arms, the right to secure a militia, the right to defend oneself and one's property. Now, all of a sudden, that is a right wing extreme point of view. And even in some of the classes I've been taking for this job, they are using that exact terminology, right wing and extremism, which is almost redundant, because I feel like once you put wing on the end, wing is just a new way of saying extreme. But what do I know? Andra, sigh, are they not answering because people online were making it sound like I was not sleeping because I have a guilty conscience? That is not it. They really need to let this go. There is absolutely nothing like that about me. Jocko and/or his silly group of parrot friends parroting everything he wants them to were wrong. There is nothing outstanding which I am secretly hiding away because he's a jerk. Hang on a second. Sorry, I had to clear my sinuses. Andrew, real quick before I forget, I also did get a hold of my friend. He looked over some of your stuff. Um, you've been very vague on certain things, and I think you're doing that on purpose until you trust somebody. But the vagueness is what's kind of holding me and my friend back from really anything else that may or may not be able to help. As far as Jocko goes, before I continue reading, I think Jocko is at a point where he's done with his military career and he's more concerned with his present and his future, which I don't have a problem with. You may, because of how it's not assisting you in your endeavors, but nothing against you whatsoever. I understand the man trying to preserve his presence and his future. All right, where do we leave off? And I'm not talking about the real reason why I did not sleep for a while there. The only thing you need to know about me is that I try my best to do the right thing. I typically am a goody goody. I have no criminal record. There is nothing whatsoever suspicious about me in the least. Telling Jocko his website is not working properly fell under the see something, say something department. The end. Yeah, okay, I gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, eagle eyes. See something, say something. I only brought up the sleep issue because I wanted Jocko's group to stop going off a fucking cliff with the stupid drug push nonsense. I can say I was stressed out and that's it. I don't think most people can say they managed to do what I did and live to tell a tale. It seemed worth mentioning at the time. I wanted to highlight that it's possible to get better without the drugs for anyone suffering from insomnia stuff, which is a part of PTSD. I'm not going into all the details here because I'm tired and I don't want to explain anything. That's why. I don't need people to second guess my every experience. You weren't there, I was. You're going to have to accept that because it's reality, the end. I'm going to stop there for a minute. The one thing I've had to recognize is we don't necessarily have to understand what people are going through. We don't have to necessarily understand or appreciate that anybody is going through anything. What I think we need to get to is a point where the cause is real enough to that person. Whatever they're going through is real enough to that person. It may not be rational to us, it may not make sense to us, but to that person it is. And I think that's one of the things we've done really good with lately is trying to recognize these things. We're maybe not as fast as we should be. We're maybe not as on point as we should be, but I think we're getting better at it. Doesn't matter if I understand. It doesn't matter if I can make sense of it. It doesn't matter if I can rationalize it. I can at least appreciate it's 100% real to you, and because it's 100% having an effect on you. That's not an open doorway for people to pry into my life. I was just aiming for a slightly lighter tone of voice in his comments because I was concerned that I am putting too much pressure onto Jocko Group and they're clearly unable to deal with the real life stuff. Really, I was just burning time because his staff cannot get him to answer inquiries about wasting people's time for months on end. I'm not Tulsi. I'm sorry her and Jocko made it sound weird, but I don't control other people or their odd trains of thought. I can say it was a little shocking, but that's about it. Andra, if you can respond to this, have you actually been in contact with them by, say, a different name than I'm using as far as Andra Book? If you know, you don't have to answer that unless you want to. Well, whatever. But because I feel like the current direction Jocko's in is he's not necessarily consulting as much as he's. I feel like he's really trying to get into the supplement industry, the health and fitness industry. I don't know if he's consulting as much. There is nothing else there which any of you need to know about. If you want tips on what to do to get past insomnia without the drugs, I'm happy to share, but not if you're going to keep being assholes about it. You know that's true. Plenty of the military podcasters were acting like jerk-offs because of my comment on that. If you want to spiral into a drug-fueled dysfunctional cloud of stupidity, that's entirely up to you. I don't give a damn to help if you're not interested. Just don't expect me to respect you for it. Otherwise, not my circus, not my monkeys. I love that phrase. You know, Andrew, if you wanted to maybe post a link where maybe your comments were responded to in a not so friendly way, or provide the yeah, If you want, you can email me at Delta Papa Bravo 0369 at Gmail. If you want to send me those links so that I can maybe try to comment on it. Um, if there's anything else you're going to need to spell it out with words on this channel, because I'm ignoring Eric Deming from now on account of him and his group of jerk-offs clickbaiting dead babies. I very rarely hint, and it is not my preferred way of communication. I did it very briefly on Jocko Podcast, and it was still accompanied by articles on specific topics. I never asked him to read minds through the internet. I also didn't realize this would lead off an endless supply of dumbassery. FYI, I really feel like I covered every possible possibility and or gripe at this point. P.S. No one has the right to try and get information out of me about what I may or may not have discussed with legal authorities in regarding to proofs or cases or anything in that department. No one. This is not an admission of any kind, just a reminder. The internet is not the place to conduct trials on any topic or any person. Andra, unless it's been a while and I forgot, I'm not entirely certain what you're talking about. As far as Eric Deming goes, Senior Chief, I believe that he believes in something. The individuals involved, I don't know. I was not in the SEAL community. I don't know these people personally. The only person I knew professionally was an individual that wrote a letter, and it seemed like they were putting an awful lot of stock, that they were investing an awful lot of value in this person and their letter. And I don't want to disparage the person, but while I wasn't with him every step of the way, I don't know that that person had the utmost background to offer that kind of an opinion. I'll just leave it at that. Funny how I get on this thing and all of a sudden my whole sinuses are going crazy. The biggest problem I had with that is I didn't want to disparage the person. Not everybody gets along in the service. We might recognize that, yeah, you served, yeah, you're not a bad person, but while we're in the service together, we may not all get along. I didn't get along with the person who wrote the letter. At the time we were serving together, I didn't think that highly of the person that wrote the letter. And it just caught me off guard. Like, dude, why would you write that letter in the first place? It wasn't necessarily our job to interact with those people. And I was like, these people seem to be putting an awful lot of stock in your letter that you probably shouldn't have written. Because you kind of come off like we had, like, these day-to-day interactions with these people. But, maybe it was just stirring up a memory. Maybe, call it PTSD, whatever. Maybe it was just stirring up memories of what I thought about the guy at the time. And I was like, you really have no business getting involved in this. But, shots fired. Can't take them back. The round's downrange. Okay, Andra, changing subjects. I don't have models. I'm making new stuff. I know how coding is supposed to work too. I just can't write code and make it do stuff. Same here. I get the concept. I understand what has to take place. Can't do it. Because a space, capital versus lowercase, they all mean different things. Not surrounded by academia and actively trying to stay away from academia because they would own the final product. Yeah, I am aware of the Zuckerberg drama. That's why I'm trying to not cold call. I got serious issues. I got serious trust issues. I get that too. Yeah, we had to do a report in one of my college classes on the whole Zuckerberg thing. I mean, it's in plain text. It's out there. He fucking stole Facebook. I guess the only way he got away with it was because, they were like Bookface, and he saw what they were trying to do and was like, oh, that's a good idea, but your shit's all fucked up. So he was like, I'm going to do what you want me to do. I'm going to do it exactly like you want me to do. But I realize all the problems with it, and I'm going to go over here. Like, everybody thinks Henry Ford invented the automobile. He just invented the assembly line. Well, they're apples and oranges, but, Zuckerberg was like, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do the better code. I'm going to do the better programming, and I'm going to call it Facebook to your book face. And his shit just blew up. Theirs didn't. They settled out of court. Hopefully they're living comfortably. Okay, Andra. Message to teenage son, just talk to the girls first. You'll know which ones are cray-cray and which are normal pretty fast. No one has the ability to keep up and act in a variety of situations. Longer term, take your time. Also, figure out your own life first. I don't really believe in teen relationships, to be honest. I'd say wait till college at least, or try to have a stable job first. I personally avoid teenage relationships like the plague, but lots of people have puppy love relationships and break up for totally unrelated to wokeism reasons. It's not all woke versus non woke. Do definitely stay away from the manosphere, though. Girls see guys that go on there as pretty much losers trying hard to be less losery. It makes a very bad first impression, comes across as desperation. Plus, there's nothing worse than fake people, and if you're only getting a girl because you acted like someone else, that's not really your girl. You will know it, even if she doesn't, and your relationship will be doomed to failure. It just really saps self confidence. Have self respect, don't put yourself in that position. Girls don't like jerks. They like guys who are confident. Confident guys don't need to prove they're man enough by acting like jerks. That's a major turnoff to any relatively well adjusted female with half decent instincts. It's like a girl trying to be attractive by screaming at you at the top of her lungs from across the hallway that she's hot. If she needs to scream it, she's not. Same with guys. If they need to scream about their awesomeness, toughness, etc., that's because it's invisible to the naked eye. Apart from that, I can't say anything because I really did avoid teen relationships like the plague. That was just my choice, though. Can't say I ever really regretted it. I would have not been able to afford becoming a young mom, and there seemed to be no point getting into a relationship just to break up a few months later. It helped that I didn't see anyone I liked for the most part, too. Zero temptation. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. The only thing I can say on that is, at the risk of oversharing, my son, who's a junior in high school, hasn't dated a girl, not in middle school, which we used to call junior high, or high school. Whether he's on the verge of that happening, I don't know. My daughter, who's a freshman or a sophomore in college, hasn't dated, in spite of what she might say. The only reason I say these things is good, bad, or indifferent, minus all of that stuff, which is all good stuff. I was all about the emotional calluses, the roller coaster ride of emotions you go through in dating somebody. Not necessarily the physicality, not necessarily that having sex and the risks associated with having sex. I'm talking about more the emotional stuff that comes along with that. That helps build these emotional calluses. That helps build experience. Because one of the worst things I had to deal with in the service was these teenagers getting married to teenagers. And I always joke that the biggest problem I had was you're a big fish in a little pond, and you can afford to marry a seven without makeup, but on your best day, you're a quarter pounder with cheese, right? So then you get married to this seven without makeup, your child bride, so to speak, because you're the big fish in a little pond, and then you transport her to a much bigger pond, right? And you're just a quarter pounder with cheese, and all of a sudden there's steak on the menu, and you cannot understand why your teenage bride is out there cheating on you. I'm sure there's more circumstances than that. I'm sure there's more situations beyond that, but that adultery used to be the common trend. So, but my point being is, I don't think teenagers who are legal adults have any place getting married due to the frequency with which they fail. They say on average, the male brain matures somewhere between 24 and 26, and I think it's maybe like 24, 23 to 25 for females. So we're not even sure of what we want. We're not even sure of who we are until 20, 25, 26 years of age. So what business do we have getting married? At the same time, if we didn't have any kind of experiences prior to that, we might end up getting married to the first person that shows an interest in us that we're interested in as well, because we don't have any prior experience. That's been some of my concerns. Or the older you get, the more devastating it's going to be when you have an experience and it doesn't go well, because it's your first experience at a much later point in time in your life. It could have a much more devastating effect. But thank you for the feedback. I'd have to make an entirely different video of what it was like growing up in the 90s, because I'm sure I'm already at the half hour mark, and there's plenty more of what you wrote, because I'm on page 5 of 11. You will never know how hard it was to not introduce a demented snot goblin joke in the bit about the manosphere above The struggle was real, clearly. Noted. Okay, so the problem with Trump, and also why I don't want to discuss politics, Theo and Donald Trump talk about addiction and sobriety. Theo Von Clips YouTube channel. Yeah, I'm familiar, but yeah, okay. This is a nice interview, and most people in the comments really like how T came across in this interview. He seems relatively genuine and interested in the person in front of him. Polite, even. Watch it first and see if you notice anything. Don't scroll to the bottom of this prior to the forming your own opinion. Bottom. He is lying the entire time. His business is sell alcohol, and he's been consuming alcohol off and on for years. If he was truly all pro sobriety because of his brother, he would not have made it his business to sell alcohol to others. Okay, I'm going to stop real quick. I didn't watch it. All right. Because if you know anything about my channel, I do the read, react, and response. So if you want me to do something, maybe send me an email saying, hey, before you respond, do this. Due to his new felony conviction, his golf clubs were actually in danger of losing their licenses. In some parts, he had to transfer the license to his son. Not only does he sell it, but in the video he claims it's harder to get over alcohol than drugs, which is again a totally bald-faced lie. Actually, it's not. Like in the state of North Carolina, where we have the Alcohol Law Enforcement Agency, a full-blown agency dedicated to that, yeah, alcohol is treated much more serious than drugs. I mean, for crying out loud, some states are legalizing marijuana. Look at how California, New York, and Chicago are treating drugs. All right, they're handing out Narcan, paid for by paid for by taxpayers, to rehabilitate or bring back to life people that have squandered the gift of life. Don't have to like my comment. No one pushes back because Theo knows to toe the line, but he is lying, and there should have been pushback on that, or at least further clarification. The reality is, everywhere he goes, all he does is lie. Even when it looks like he's genuinely interested and caring, he is still actively misrepresenting himself the entire time. I'm going to stop right there real quick. I think anybody in that position, politician or otherwise, is exactly the same way. I think it comes down to personality. The trend being that when he put his name in the hat for politics, all of a sudden he went from being, hey, Donald Trump, to all of it, he was the descendant of Hitler. I mean, I have never heard the word Nazi thrown around so many times. Just go on regular TV and listen to how many channels are just bashing the hell out of him. There used to be some sort of sanctity in the position. You didn't have to like the person, but there was a sanctity in the position. There was also this thing where, like, late night hosts didn't have a political opinion of their own. They picked on the president regardless of who was the president. But I feel like for some ungodly reason, President Obama got this messianic treatment, this messianic stature. And for some reason, a small portion of that was passed on to his party as well as all of their candidates. So like when Hillary ran, nobody could see that the Clinton name is just god awful. Nobody could see that the Clinton name is just tarnished. Nobody could see that Hillary herself was a god awful candidate. All right, that most people didn't vote for Trump. They just voted for anything but Hillary. All right, and then they tried to find reasons to like Trump. Same point this time. Now that the election's already over, which I should have done this before, but whatever. Nobody could see that Kamala wasn't chosen by the people. She was chosen by the party without the people's consent. And then a lot of the people just blindly were like, okay, cool. She wasn't given the opportunity by the people. She was thrown in there by her party. And all the people that are talking about, oh, it's all this racism because she's a person of color. Oh, it's misogyny because she's a woman. Oh, it's all of the above because she's a woman of color. No, she was a god-awful candidate. She was a god-awful candidate. I don't know if she's a god-awful person, but as a candidate, she was god-awful. And for anyone to think that, Trump is anything different than anybody in the past, open your eyes. All right, he's a lot of the same of what we've had in the past, and in many, many ways, he's not. And if you refuse to see the fact that all of a sudden he went from being Trump to saying, I'm going to run for president and I'm going to run with this party, to being Hitler's descendants. And look at how quickly people were like, yeah, okay, whatever you tell me to think, I'm going to think it. And I'd say about half the country was kind of like, no, no. And if you thought there was no tomfoolery with the election, look at the current election results. I'm just saying. I won't comment on Theo, but it's pretty clear addiction is a very real struggle for him, and he has not really kicked the monkey off his back as of yet, and maybe he never will. My opinion is that he should be in recovery, not messing around with T interviews. That being said, of course, he's not going to say no. He's a recovering addict comedian, and someone arranged an interview with the president for him. He's going to toe the line. Why is he even there though? Since when do presidents give such interviews? Trump is good at buying people and almost always goes for people he knows would be fairly easy to control. That's the issue with Trump. He has a knack for creating and exploiting this type of situation. Andra, I'm going to pause right there because, again, this is a read, react, and respond. To a degree, I feel like you're falling into a trap, and it's a trap I've fallen into. I don't like Kamala, so therefore I would probably have a tremendous amount of confirmation bias, which means I would actively seek information that helps my brain convince myself why she's a horrible person. Is it possible you're doing the same? I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying, is it possible you're doing the same? Somehow you came around to the conclusion Trump bad, Orange Man bad. So now you actively seek out stuff to support your confirmation bias. Just a hypothetical. Whoever arranged this interview was the middleman, but Trump is the one pulling the strings, and Russia is pulling strings behind him. I don't believe that. The biggest pro drugs in the military company in the U.S. was led by Russian Moscow trained scientists. Unlike a couple years ago, all the data which is being used to sell this shit to your guys and to advertised is heavily skewed and corrupted. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of pumping drugs into my system. The main common thread running between these typically very different people are drugs addictions, which Trump believes are less bad than the alcohol he already sells, according to himself. The only reason Crenshaw was able to pass that crap is because he got into political bed with AOC, who used to work for the alcohol industry and has always been pro drugs and anti military. Trump being pro substances makes perfect sense because he was pushing drug experimentation on veterans while he was in the office. That's why Crenshaw and Jocko won't get off the drugs train either. The reality is that the drugs were in the SEALs community long before Trump actively started campaigning. Again, Trump was at Hillary's wedding. He's been rubbing elbows with Dems his entire life. It was one of the first things he allowed to proceed and pushed for almost as soon as he got into office. The current senior GOP lineup is almost entirely made up of ex-Democrats. He's undermining. You may not like the GOP or the Dems, but we do need two separate parties in direct competition with each other. We cannot have a hostile takeover of one party by the other because they lied and said they want to leave the Dems now. That should not be enough to guarantee them a coronation on the conservative side. I would like to see more than two parties. The veteran community who supports him has no clue what he's really like. They felt ignored before and he gave them attention, but it's the wrong kind of attention. He knows they're going to get fucked up afterwards. He just does not care. He's okay to sacrifice them as long as it benefits him. Them being fucked up makes him better able to control them. To him, it's an opportunity, not a problem to fix. This shit is what caused World War II. Both the commies and the Nazis used drugs for mass manipulation, and they specifically targeted the military to pull it off because the drugs undermine the people's willpower and ability to make decisions. It makes them easier to control. It doesn't matter what political party you are, reality cannot change. Any politician with even half a brain would have said no to this stuff. It is not true that they discovered new uses for the drugs. They are now there are no mind-altering substances which will make you into a better fighter. None. They do not exist, and it's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of factual science. Let's not forget, in countries like Nazi Germany, they disarmed the citizenry and then convinced the citizens that a specific portion of the population were their enemy. Not unlike the Democratic Party that wants to reverse the Second Amendment, disarm the citizenry, and then convince everybody that people that don't vote for Democrats are bad people. Essentially, if you look at it, the Democratic Party is the only political party that's ever peddled in racism, segregation, bigotry. they don't seem to have changed much. They changed their tactics, they changed their words, but they're still peddling in racism, bigotry, discrimination. They're just targeting different people now. They're trying to disarm the citizenry, and they're trying to create enemies. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Look at the Discord. Look at the nature of Discord. They own almost all the media sources, telling everybody that if you voted for Trump, telling everybody if you don't vote Democrat, you're racist, you're misogynist, you're redneck, hillbilly, all these negative things. You need to be hated. You're intolerant. All these things. Tell me I'm wrong. They can lie and take advantage of your ignorance to create a narrative that it is a matter of opinion, but it is not. That is the lie, and it is effective only because there is a massive amount of ignorance in the U.S. veterans community around these topics, and because they had very famous Navy SEALs push the drugs crap at some point. You cannot their fame to make this decision. Their fame means nothing. It won't change reality. There's quite a bit of self-serving opportunism too in these communities. The more you give people the impression that drugs are okay, the more addicts you will attract into the military ranks. The opportunism will get worse, not better. Addicts do not make a functional military. They cannot. Literally, they're incapable of functioning anymore. So all that happens is that the capability will be undermined. Andra, are you specifically referring to a lot of the special operators talking about CBD, THC, ayahuasca, LSD, how they're dealing with TBI and whatnot? I'm just curious because otherwise I feel like I'm not tracking this conversation. Because otherwise, if you're talking about certain drugs like Ambien or uh, sleep meds, I'm I'm not really tracking. What T is doing is the opposite of what he is saying. No matter how sincere he sounds to some people, everyone will leave in the reality his laws create, not the reality his words sort of seem to suggest he wants. He can change his words tomorrow, they don't mean anything. If he did not care that his own beloved brother died due to substances, at least enough to stop selling them to other people, there is nothing else higher which you can appeal to make him care. He's lying, and he's lying to recovering addicts to their faces and trying to make drugs seem less bad than alcohol. That's a very fucked up thing to say and do. When they relapse, that will be his campaign's talking point for the week. It's gross. He just tailors the lies to the audience. Again, this is why I want more than the two political parties. I want other viable choices than right or left, red or blue. Also, he's appropriating characteristics from other people to sell said lies. People like what he portrays himself as do exist, but it's not him. He's not that guy. He just thinks that if he pretends that he's that guy, people will like him more. I just don't think that he's capable of protecting the public interest. He's good at PR, that's it. Also, he literally copied Joe Biden's campaign from last election with the woman of color pick, which was Tulsi. Come on. I don't know what will happen, but this is a crap show, objectively speaking. Tulsi's not his vice president pick, depending on when you wrote this. I'd have to go back and look at when you wrote this, but Tulsi's not his vice presidential pick as of right now, the 24th of November. Okay, last one I promised. This article just came out recently. America isn't ready for the wars of the future, and they're already here by Mark A. Miley and Eric Schmidt, September to October 2024, published on October 5th, 2024. This is why y'all need to get on the innovation train, and also why it's better to do it now than later. In the absence of better choices, the above is the default, and the above was always going to be the default. The Pentagon is not great at thinking outside any box. They're going to lean on the Special Forces community to try to get even 5% outside the box, and it's not enough. None of the above really looks promising for freedom-loving societies. The AI they're talking about is a dead end, and it is not the future. Neither is the continuing to try and rely on the goodwill of dictatorships. The only reason they're trying to do that and risking to compromise freedom values is because they don't have better ideas. The above is a dystopian version of what the future may look like. That's all. But in the absence of anything better, it may default to the dystopian version. They're too reactionary. You can't lead if you're always reacting. The good news is that they recognize that there are some limitations. The bad news is that people who are truly thinking outside the box are not in those decision making rooms. They don't have a place at the table, and they cannot lead without even being a part of the conversation. You will never get a real place at any table if you don't start putting in effort, and you will still be in the middle of everyone else's bad ideas and affected by them. Not leaning in offers no advantage at all. The only reason they're considering innovation now is because they saw it working in Ukraine. But the only reason it's working in Ukraine is because Ukraine was okay with it actually innovating and pushing in that direction. Had the U.S. done this innovation years prior and just called it the Making Soldiers' Lives Better initiative, we wouldn't have to have this conversation. But the powers that be are adverse to anything new and prone to believing that new needs to be catastrophic. It does not need to be that way. You cannot be a world leader while listening to Chinese propaganda. That's not the U.S. leading. That's China leading by manipulating the ignorance of the U.S. with propaganda. Chinese culture is opposite to the West in too many ways. There's no way this can work. You're surprised your standards of living have gone to shit. I'm not. They've gone to shit because of the above. The endless compromises with dictatorships have always eroded freedoms and standards. I do agree with the innovate faster than the enemy bit. I would just also add that you need a better direction than the enemy too. The special ops are already going to be affected. They already were in the past. This is not something you can avoid. Whether you're on the front line or a little behind it won't make much difference. Neither will which bum sits in the president's chair. All that really matters is what tools they have to use. If all the tools are crappy, your lives will still be pretty crappy. Giving them better tools is the only thing which really makes any sense. Long term, they gotta be unable to go full tyrant. It cannot just be an option to have and preserve freedom. Again, the above is just someone's thoughts, not the future, but it is still a good litmus test of what might be. This potential version of a dystopian future has not changed for decades, and it is all informed today as it's ever been. Why? Because everyone keeps acting like the Roomba bot, banging away in that corner. There's no creativity at the top at all. It's entrenched, dogmatic group thinking. Why is everyone talking about the special ops? Because they were supposed to be the more creative bunch of the military. That's why. It's not personal, it's just what the posters say and what you're typically portrayed as. As long as your veterans have that status, you also get benefits with it, though. One of those benefits is that you can apply for patents and get priority and perks. You have access to other funds too, compared to everyone else. You can apply for the DoD to help you with business stuff as well, if you're a business owner. You shouldn't waste the time you have now when it's a little quieter. You should see it more as an opportunity to improve your chances of survival. Come next engagement, in my opinion, there are non-dystopian options. There's no need to psych yourselves out and just assume dystopia for everything. That's all I wanted to say. The end. Sorry, Daniel. Just saw this and had to say something. I don't like dystopian crap. Like, I really don't like it. On that note, you said an awful lot, and I'll try to make a short answer. A lot of our general officers are more liberal than one would think. Why? I don't know. General Mattis once got a lot of praise and a lot of popularity and a lot of acclaim because he was so far outside the norm. Most of your general officers tend to be married, stable marriages, families. Like there's this cookie cutter solution to be a general officer, and a lot of them know the secret and they abide by it. General Mattis did not. Does that mean that he was the most outstanding general that ever existed? I don't know. I never quite understood the hype, but I didn't exactly work one on one with the man to understand. That being said, should the military generals be allowed to disagree with the president? To a degree, yes, but with the understanding they work for him. The popular thing to do with Trump was to undermine him at every turn because it was socially acceptable, and it went against the very decorum of the office because we created a society where we all accepted going against the grain as long as we agreed we didn't like the person. But what if Kamala was elected? Would the same standards apply to her? Could she be treated the same way Trump was treated? And that's the litmus test I use. I don't care if you like Trump or not, Andra. I'm just saying things need to be fair and equal. Had Kamala been elected, would she have been treated the exact same way Trump was treated by her generals, etc.? And I'm not saying Trump did a good job surrounding himself with the best, at least not the ones that had his best interest in mind. I think they had a lot of personal interests. Oh, hey, haha, I didn't miss new videos after all. Yay, I was feeling a little bad for not checking in a while. Let me know when the new one comes out. It's going to come out today. Is that it? Is that everything? Oh, wow. 50 minutes. Good God. I did it in under an hour. All right. Well, the election has come and gone. We have the results. It is what it is. I hate to say it. I think a lot of us that at least I'm close to, we voted specifically against, not necessarily for. It's sad that that has become the nature of our elections. I can tell you with a sense of confidence, I voted against John Kerry. I voted against Barack Obama. I voted against Hillary. I voted against Biden. And I voted against Kamala. I didn't exactly vote for anybody. I, by my nature, am not a big fan of the Democratic Party, but that goes all the way back to the Civil War. You can have your reasons for feeling your way. I can have my reasons for feeling mine. I'm not overly concerned with the keyboard warrior who wants to take to my channel and, oh, blah, 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 tough talk. You know, it's kind of like Mike Tyson said. Everybody can talk tough until they get punched in the face. It is what it is. Um, only the future will tell what's going to happen. Do I believe that there are countries and groups, all of the above, that have a dedicated interest in seeing us fail, that seeing us turn into the Roman Empire? Absolutely. Absolutely. And if humanity hasn't taught us anything, empires rise and empires fall. By that metric, by that logic, in our own time frame, we've seen Russia amass into the USSR, only to see the USSR fold. And for anybody that knows anything, there were some less than positive outcomes to that. I'll just leave it at that. So we've seen that happen. Is it possible the same thing could happen to China, Russia, us? Another entity could become the next superpower. Perhaps it can come out of South America. Perhaps a bunch of South American countries could unite together and form a united continent of some kind. And I mean, if you actually take a moment to think about it, kind of going off the rails here, think of how many people south of the Mexican border speak Spanish, and yet Spanish originated in Spain. It did not originate in North, Central, or South America. But think about how many people speak Spanish because of the Spanish Inquisition. I'm just saying. At one point in time, they used to say that the sun never sets on the British Empire because the British Empire had people everywhere in the world. So, yeah, if we don't watch ourselves, if we don't pay attention, whatever we like about ourselves, whatever we like about our way of life, it could come to an end. And it could do so through voting. That is why I want to see more than two political parties, because I think the problem is with the two of them so diametrically opposed to one another, I think they're more focused on winning and their own personal agendas than they are about the people they're supposed to serve. These are supposed to be public servants that work for us, not for their personal interests. So that's why I'd like to see alternative parties. If you look at the history of the United States, when we came out of the Revolutionary War against Britain, we didn't have the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. So, you know. But Andra, thank you so much for the content. Thank you for the multiple points of view on different subjects. I do think you're not wrong. I think that, one of the hardest things as a veteran myself, you go from a certain lifestyle. And I will share with you this if it helps anybody. When I came off active duty, my take-home pay was about $5,000 a month. That was after taxes. That was after deductions. So part of that, when I was on active duty, I got paid my basic paycheck. Then tax-free, I got a housing allowance, and tax-free, I got a grocery allowance. Those aren't the actual names, but you could look these things up. They're not that hard to find. My point is this. Transitioning from the military lifestyle after 20 years, knowing exactly how much I was going to get paid, knowing how much to budget, knowing an awful lot, going into the civilian workforce, that was a unique and rough transition. A lot of things that were guaranteed, a lot of things that were stable, a lot of things that were bankable were no longer there. My retirement was 50% of my basic pay. I no longer had the housing allowance. I no longer had the grocery allowance. So I went from about 5 grand down to about 1,600 after it was all said and done. So when my deductions were taken out, when my taxes were taken out, I had about $1,600. That's about a $3,400 a month deficit. To give you some perspective, let's see what that looks like. That's about $40,800 of financial loss. So, Andra, to kind of paint that picture for you, if there are veterans you disagree with, whether they're special operators or not, because a lot of those special operators also had additional stipends for like jump, dive, hazardous duty, language. As a veteran myself, I understand the preservation mindset of trying to preserve one's way of life. Not only that, but something you may not be aware of, and maybe you are. A lot of those guys in the special operations community, not all of them do a full 20 and retire. Some of them realize that they can't perform at that level and they have to get out before a full 20. If they're able to retire with a short retirement, good. A short retirement is anything less than 20 but above 15. Some of them get medically separated because they go so hard for so long that they break. And the military has a very short window of opportunity for you to get better. I think at max you get maybe 6 months, and after 6 months, if you're not at 100% operating potential, you're done. And you have to understand, based on certain injuries, to go from 100% to being injured, possibly surgically repaired, rehabilitation, 6 months is not a lot of time to get back to where you were. So a lot of these special operators, they didn't exactly do a full 20, so they don't have a retirement to lean on. So I understand as a veteran the preservation of oneself, being able to keep the roof over your head, being able to keep the lights on, being able to keep the water flowing. If you feel that's getting in bed with the devil, you are free and clear to do you. But at the end of the day, thank you for leaving your input. Thank you for participating. And for anybody else that wants to get involved, you see how it works. I will read and react and respond to your comments. Not to be outdone, I had a response to my last video. Give me 1 second and I will read that and I will discuss it. Stand by.